Hi everyone, Charlie here, starting the live cast. Just waiting for Dave Anthony to add himself so we can get started with this this trip down memory lane. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully it's a civil conversation. Hopefully Dave behaves himself. But until that point, I just have to assume that things will be good. While we're waiting for Dave to jump on, I'm just wondering if there's any questions that anyone's had. Oh, Dave's here. I'm going to connect him. We should be going. Just waiting for Dave now. And
Fuck you, you son of a bitch.
Oh my God.
I heard you.
Wow, that's a nice ISO beard you got going there.
Yours looks nice and trim. And...
I actually trimmed it this morning because I thought I wanted to look good for the Instagram live.
This is the way I look is America. The way you look is Australia.
Yeah, right.
This is the difference.
How is it over there?
It's really awful.
Oh no, that's not from what I've heard. Everything's opening up. Things fine.
Yeah.
Guys are through the worst.
We just decided it's over, and we're gonna go about our business and start doing our stuff. They just showed a picture of people in Wisconsin where the governor tried to shut down the state, and the Supreme Court overruled and said he couldn't shut down the state. And they just showed a highway just packed with people all going up north to lakes for vacation for the 3-day weekend. It's just...
You know what? I think I'm surprised. I didn't realize until now, but Americans really love freedom. I hear that a lot.
I don't know if you've ever died with your lungs full of fluid, gurgling sweet freedom, but it's pretty amazing.
But what about California? You guys are doing better, aren't you?
We are doing better. Our curve is going down, but Northern California is doing a lot better than Southern California. But we're opening back up, and then this weekend, it's because I don't know why. It's a 3-day weekend. It's Memorial Day, but 1,200 pastors are going to hold services in their churches. So that should go. Look,
I was raised Catholic, and so, part of me remembers what that was like and putting a faith in a higher power. And my mother, Irish Catholic, was a special minister, went to church pretty much every day until she died. But even she was like, it's all bullshit. It's just more for her.
Yeah.
It's more of a club, as a place to go out and see friends. Like, I think if it had got to this stage, she'd be like, you know what? I think I'll stay home. There's no need for me to go to church every day.
I know they keep talking to priests and pastors, and they're all like, look, we got to get together. We got to have group worship. And you're like, you really don't. Like, it's not part of the, like, God wasn't like, hey, build a house and everyone go in the house to talk to me. Like, it's not a thing.
Well, there is the financial imperative. I mean, you've got to pass the collection plate, right? I mean, that has to be an issue.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It can't be anything else.
The church that I went to as a kid, St. James, which has since been burnt down because it was the home of a horrible pedophile.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful.
But that was like one of the most beautiful, ornate churches. And even as a kid, I remember sitting there watching the plate coming down my row and seeing all the parents putting cash in it. And I'm like, this seems wrong. We're sitting in the equivalent of a castle. Like, why are they getting money?
Yeah, because they got to fund the Vatican.
We were paying for the privilege. We were paying to hear a priest tell us that homosexuality was evil. We had front row seats for the homophobic Olympics. You can
get that anywhere. Like,
yeah. Idiots. Why are my parents paying for that? Now, Dave, we came up with the loose premise to get people in. We needed a hook. We needed to dangle something. So we said
nobody wants to hear us just talk
about Catholicism.
We should do one of these a week where we break down each religion.
Yeah, great, awesome. When it gets to Scientology, though, you're on your own.
That's the best one.
Especially in LA, man. Like I remember the first time I went to LA in 2007, and I was hanging out with this girl who was a local, grew up, born and raised. And when we went out to some bar or something, I was like, "Oh, tell me about Scientology." Like, only stuff I'd read about Tom Cruise or whatever. And she was like, "Don't mention Scientology." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Who the fuck?" And she's like, "You don't understand. It's like they're everywhere. They're
And
everywhere. It's like this secret society."
and they put you on lists. They actually have lists that you go on, and then you're on a list of some sort.
So do you think, like, for a lot of actors getting to LA, joining Scientology is a kind of calculated move, where it's like, well, I mean, from things I've heard, is like, you could go to a private like acting class by, some of the best actors in the world. It costs you $5, but you've got to be part of the Church of Scientology. Or there's all these meet and greets where you can meet producers and directors and studio heads, all that kind of stuff.
It definitely helps your career. When I first got here, I was engaged to an actress, and her agent was like, "You should join the Beverly Theater. The Beverly Theater is a Scientology theater. It just helps you with connections, like because they have agents and they have producers and they have everything. Like it's all set up. And once you're in, then they're like, "Yeah, we'll help you." It's cool.
When I went to
Does
New
the Catholic Church have that? No.
When I went to New York for the first time, I walked past this whatever the Scientology Center was on the East Side, and I had time to kill, so I went in and did the IQ test. Have you done that?
Oh no, I stay away.
It's fun. You should do it. It's really good. It's like an old school newspaper quiz. So you get given this big multiple choice quiz, and they're all like non sequitur type questions.
Yeah.
It's like, you find an injured bird on the road. Do you A, kill it, B, take it to get help, C, conceal its homosexuality to advance its career?
Yeah, that's right. It's a psychology test to see if you're vulnerable to their witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, like I got that, but it sort of felt like it didn't matter what answers you gave because, I sort of ticked off whatever my answers were. And then they fed it into this like 1970s sci-fi.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
It's like big blinking lights and stuff.
We're now going to take your answers and put it into our fake machine.
And I knew in my head, I was like, when this comes out, I'm assuming there's going to be some deficiency, which can only be addressed by Scientology. And so sure enough, because, you sort of fill out your occupation and stuff. And so when she was going through it, she was like, "Oh, well, you're an actor, so your communication levels are quite good. But down here, these are the areas that you're not addressing." And it's like reading an astrology where they say, you're an extrovert, but you like to keep to yourself. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
That's completely.
Yeah, and then you go, "Oh my God, that's me."
That's me. You understand me to a T. And so then she started breaking down, okay, so this is the entry level course and, costs this much. And then you advance up. And because of that South Park episode, had just recently come out. I was like, "Tell me about Xenu." And she's like, "Xenu and the blocks of ice and the volcanoes and the spirits. Like, is that all true?" And she's like, "Well, it's a bit more complicated than that." I said, "Yeah, I know, but like layman's terms." And I sort of explained to her, I said, like, most other religions, like Catholicism, they don't conceal like the steps towards enlightenment.
Right.
In Catholicism. It's like, this is the whole deal. There's this guy, Jesus Christ, died for our sins, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Conceal your homosexuality, so we have that in common.
That's right.
But, I said, so I don't understand what's the secrecy? What's the secrecy? And she was sort of dodging and weaving. And funny enough, Dave, in order to answer that question, I'd have to sign up to the course.
Oh my God, which is just $800. Like it's not. They do a thing where they put the head or whatever he is puts out a new book every once in a while. It's like the Scientology Bible sort of. Mm-hmm. And if you're in Scientology, you have to buy the new book, and it's like $500. So every couple of years, you're like, "Oh, new book! It's gonna be another $500." Like it's just such an awesome grift.
That's a great actual Patreon level for TOFOP. Maybe we should bring out a new TOFOP like book, a compendium or something every $500 on Patreon.
This one, chapter 1, Charlie and his pancakes.
Okay, well, interesting you should bring that up. I had saved some questions for the end, but we can just pick through them as we go. And one of the questions was they would like to get Dave's opinion on my pancakes. And so,
Okay.
are you aware of the whole
I,
pancake discussion with Will?
I haven't heard the pancake discussion.
Okay, all right. So, I was explaining to Will that I do this healthy version of pancakes where the ingredients are serving of one. You would put in an egg, a banana, half a cup of oats, some self-raising, some baking soda, a little bit of vanilla essence, maybe some protein powder if you want it a bit sweet. And then you blend that up and it becomes a kind of batter. And then you just pour that into the pan and you fry it up. And they're delicious. Like, I love them. Will was appalled.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was like,
It's not a pancake.
well, it's not a, no, okay. So I didn't realize you guys were going to be such goddamn pancake traditionalists. Like,
Oh, no, wait. That's the only reason I say that is because I know what a pancake is.
but it is the equivalent of a pancake. Like, if you had a gluten-free pancake, so you weren't using flour but using some substitute, is that still a pancake, or does it have to have white flour?
I think it's got to have white flour. It's got to be a big fluffy pancake, or else call it something else. It's not a pancake.
Like, what, banana cake? Oh, shit, there we go. Done.
I call it a banana cake.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, let's get started on what the loose auspices of this live was, which is we're going to talk a bit about the history of our respective podcasts. And I thought a good place to start, because I don't actually quite know the official history of this, but how did you and Greg become aware of TOFOP?
Okay, so I was on Twitter and someone tweeted at me and I think all four of us. You guys, your podcasts are really similar. You're just like the Australian version of each other, right? And
I've never been so insulted. I mean, look at these two screens. What do we have in common apart from facial hair? But even look at the facial hair is the distinction. Look at this compared to that.
This is sexy what I have going on here.
You look like someone's dog that has been missing for 2 weeks and they're found in a drain.
This is what ladies want to have sex with. It's just kind of, can you control it? What's it like?
Yeah. Can it sleep beside the bed?
In a little dog bed? Yeah. So someone sent me that message, and then I tweeted at Will, and then I started listening to it, and I was like, yeah, this is what we do. We just, just two guys, two old friends bullshitting. And then we started talking, Will and I started communicating on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then he was like, hey, we're going to be over there soon. And then when you came over, we had you guys on.
That's right. So, yeah, my memory is similar. I don't recall I remember someone contacting me on Twitter to say, no, I think what it was, someone contacted me to say, hey, you guys got a shout out on this podcast, Walking the Room. And so I listened to the episode, and I think you read out that tweet, or you mentioned that tweet about, and I think you made fun of us. Like, there was,
yeah.
I think there was a general skepticism about your Australian contemporaries.
Yeah.
And so I actually just I retweeted a thank you or something to you guys, having not listened to the episode, and then listened to it and was like, oh, they're making fun of us. Like, I don't know why I should have listened to it before I retweeted. And then, then I remember, because I think Will had just moved to LA.
I think he had just moved. Yeah. Or he was about to move, one or the other.
Yeah. So when did you start Walking the Room?
Oh my God. 2009.
Right. Okay. So you're a year ahead of us.
Yeah.
Because I think we recorded in April 2010, but didn't actually release it till a couple of months later. But so June 10th, 2010 is when we started. So you've been up and running for a year.
Maybe not. I'd say then near the end of 2009. So it was probably just a few months.
Similar.
We were pretty early.
And so was there any, like for us, we'd loved Kevin Smith's Modcast. Like Will and I, at one stage, Will was doing some stand-up and I was traveling with him because I was making these little web videos for him. And when we'd be driving from, venue to venue, we would listen to Smodcast and just be like, this is two old friends just bullshitting. We can fucking do this. And so that was the inspiration for us. Was there a similar inspiration for Walking the Room?
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, dude they're one of the original podcasts. And I just remember someone put up I didn't even know what a podcast was, even though a couple of my friends were doing them. Pardo and Jimmy Dore were doing pretty successful podcasts. And oh yeah, dude, someone put up their thing on Facebook, and I was like, what the fuck is a podcast? And I remember I just found it and started listening to it, and I was just laughing my ass off, and I was like, this is like amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess there's also like Ricky Gervais was probably the first really big one that you kind of everyone knew about and stuff. But I was the same. What I really loved about it was the idea, because I had sort of dabbled in radio, but I always felt there's this pressure in radio to have a conversation in 3 minutes and go out on a button and stuff. And then when you started having these like long rambling conversations, the hypotheticals, starting a tangent, going in 6 directions and coming back, I'm like, oh my God, I think I may have found the medium that best suits me. I dabble in a bunch of different things, but talking shit for hours seems to be, something that I could do easily.
And literally just going off on tangents for 20 minutes, because that's what a real conversation is. Yeah. You're not focused on one thing. You have another thought and you follow that, and then you never come back to your original idea. Like, that's what a real conversation is. So, yeah.
And so there was no, like, Will and I often joke about TOFOP. We started a podcast back in the days when just the fact that you were starting a podcast, that was the hook. Now it's like, we're going to rewatch, the Godfather films in reverse, 60 times or whatever. There was no hook beyond that for Walking the Room?
No, I mean, for us, so Greg and I had done an online radio show in the year 2000. It was a .com thing that was never going to make money. They got like $100 million to do online radio, and no one was listening.
The .com boom. I mean, that was how I sort of got started as well. Yeah. Like 2001, me and some friends were hired to pitch like this guy had this idea that people would watch videos on their computers, and we were like, this guy's fucking a moron. And he paid us to make all these like sketches that he was going to like host on this site, and they had like hundreds of millions of dollars. They went bust in about 2 years.
Yeah, same thing. So it was called Comedy World, and they got a bunch of comedians, and I mean, there were like 15 shows. So Greg and I had a show, and they were just, I mean, they did that thing where they had like a $60,000 painting in the lobby, and every chair was $1,000, like just blowing through fucking money.
A graffiti artist has done the lobby. They've got like a half pipe, out in the drinks room.
Yeah, and they're like, we gotta get a chef, and you're just what?
Yeah, just smoking like rolled up notes instead of cigarettes. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they burned through $100 million, and then it just went kaput. But in that time, we learned how to do radio, sort of, from experts.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I was next thing I wanted to talk about was when we did actually meet for the first time, and I can't remember I think you did our pod first, just you on your own.
I did.
Came to Will's. We did 2 back to back.
Yeah, I came to Will's. Yeah.
Side note: I've been tagging old episodes. I've just been going through the TOFOP catalog and just tagging stuff, make it easy to search and blah, blah, blah. And going through those first 100 episodes has been rough, man. Like, I've been putting on Twitter, I've been posting some photos of what I've been tagging, and I actually got to our episodes. I think it was within our first, if not our first 10, our first 20 episodes, you were in 2 of them. And the sound quality,
oh my God,
so bad. It's so bad. Like, it's virtually unlistenable.
Yeah.
And then the conversations, I think within like the first, similar to this call, actually, within the first 5 minutes of you sitting down in that first podcast, we were talking about Jesus wanking. It's like, oh, wow, this dude can hang. But so you did TOFOP. We did 2 episodes back to back, and then we went to Greg's place. And do you remember this? We went into a shoe closet.
Yeah, that's where we recorded. That's where we recorded.
So with all your radio experience, we know how to produce a show. Come sit in a fucking shoe cupboard, and we didn't even have microphones. Remember, we were all hunched over this tiny little digital recorder.
Yeah.
Showbiz, baby.
Yeah, we just would do it over the recorder. But the reason we went in there is because we did do radio, so we knew soundproof. That's the best soundproof room in the whole, place.
And so what were your first impressions of Will and I?
I thought you guys were, a more refined version, but like us. I thought you guys were funny. Like I was like, oh, I can totally hang with these guys. Like these guys are like just like normal us
Yeah.
type dudes. Like that's the funny thing is we had no idea Will was famous. We had
Right.
absolutely no idea. We just thought he was like us, like a comedian, and it wasn't going well, so he was doing a podcast.
Yeah, and then you come to Australia and like, oh my God, there's a statue of him at the airport.
I remember the fun just when we went to Australia, walking down the street with them, and people are just like, "Hey, hey, hey," and I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I remember Will saying actually that trip to LA was kind of really eye-opening for him because he was like, oh, I used to think people were nice to me because they generally liked me, but I think it's because they see me on TV because now I'm in LA, people aren't nearly as nice to me.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember when you came round to Will's apartment, I was really impressed because I'm like, well, this guy doesn't know who we are. He's listened to however many podcasts we've done, maybe. But then you sort of just came around. It was like, oh, this is easy. Like as soon as we started talking, I'm like, okay, all right, we can do this. This can be a partnership.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have the comedic sensibility of when, like, there are. I was on a podcast the other day, and they weren't two people were not comedians, and it was just like, oh God, what are we gonna do? But like, we all know how to just talk and have fun and sort of riff. But there's people who aren't like have that like sort of skill, and it's just weird. It's just like stilted. But when we all sat down together, we just all started bullshitting.
Well, I think what I liked most about, Walking the Room, or, what I think most people listen to it liked about it, which differentiates it from TOFOP, is that you guys it felt like there was a lot more kind of real life honesty stuff going on. Like, and a lot of times you felt like you were sort of sitting in on some kind of like men's group where it's like, talking about frustrations and, bickering and all that kind of stuff. But there's, genuine affection and history of friendship behind all that. And I think that's what made it so appealing was, we talked about it wasn't radio, and that's the complete antithesis of what you get if you tune into like an FM radio show.
Yeah, that's right. And we kind of learned that we had a producer that worked with us at Comedy World who was actually like a real radio guy, and he would give us notes and just say, just be honest and real, and then we were also, the reason we did this because both of our careers were in the shitter, and also that was right after the housing collapse, so America was just in a massive recession. So I think a lot of people responded to us being like, everything's fucked for us, and they never heard that sort of side of show business about how hard comedy is, and like the fact that Greg had a TV show and now he was like, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah.
So people just kind of responded to that, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what I think is now the bedrock of all good podcasts. Like the reason why Maron and, Rogan and, the Rogan thing is so interesting because if you were to pitch that prior to podcasting, it's like this dude who's an MMA color commentator / hunter, who's into psychedelics and, this is going to be the biggest show in the world. And it wouldn't make any sense from that kind of old entertainment point of view. But what people love about it is it's so specific, like it's so unique to him. Like whether or not you like what he does or whatever, you can't argue that it's not pandering. There's not an attempt, to kind of play one way or the other. It seems like this is a guy who's into these very weird, diverse kind of interests.
Yeah, and he's just honest about who he is, and he's not trying to create some false personality. He's just like, okay, so I'm Joe Rogan, and this is what Joe Rogan thinks. And yeah, I mean, that's all it is. If you're real, then I think people will listen.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I feel like. It's weird at the moment in Australia. We're obviously a bit behind the States when it comes to kind of development and media or whatever. So there's been this big push.
And death.
Yeah. But there has been this big push into podcasting by mega media companies, and they've been sort of flagging it for a while. COVID's obviously paused that a lot. But what you're seeing more and more now is these mega media companies are coming in and packaging up, well-known people with production and all that kind of stuff. And, Will and I sort of talked a lot about we don't want to be the guys who open the door and then, got steamrolled by the big boys. Like we need to grow and adapt and try and keep up. But it's funny how this thing that was once so democratic that we all owned and we all had access to, and, you know, our little show in Australia could be on par with Mark Maron in terms of, you know, well, you've got your audience, we've got our audience, but we're all owning the same space. But it feels like, just like happens with movie studios and just like happens
Yep.
with TV networks and just like happens with radio stations, that the big boys are going to come in, they're going to squeeze the rest out. And, you know, I think it's a bit of it's a dilemma that we face, because it's like, well, we don't want to give up what we do, and we always want it to be TOFOP, but at the same time, you have to give more and adapt and compete, you know, offer a product that is on the same level, at least on the production values level.
Yeah, on the production values level, for sure. It's weird to watch, particularly with the COVID, because, you know, all these people are locked in their houses, and now all these stars are like, oh, I'll do a podcast.
I'm doing it on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's
what
fucking annoying.
Kazurinsky does an 8 episodes of a show, and now it's being turned into a TV show. It's just like interviewing people. It's all stupid. But I remember watching when like Conan was jumping and all these big names jumping. I'm like, you really,
hang on,
Conan, you don't need to do a
O'Brien.
podcast.
What was the headline? He was on the cover of the Hollywood Reporter.
Oh yeah,
it's like groundbreaker, or, you know, changing
Yeah.
the landscape. And
Yeah,
it's just like,
no.
are you fucking kidding me?
Get the fuck out of our shit. We're people who didn't have anything. That's why we started doing this.
So let's talk about the first time you and Greg, well, I don't know if it's the first time, but when you and Greg came to Australia to do your run of shows. So you had the crossover, so you had enough of an audience in Australia that you were like, well, let's come out and do some solo stand-up at the Comedy Fest, Melbourne Comedy Festival. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, the first time we went down was before we did the festival. We just came down and did the podcast. I think we did
Right.
two. I think we did a TOFOP also.
Well, so that was now, this is where I get a bit fuzzy. Was Superpod the first time we'd been on stage together?
Yes.
Okay, right. Okay,
Yeah, that's what it was. So maybe we definitely came down there and did Walking the Room before we did the one-man show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you saying then the following year you did your solo shows?
Yeah, and that's when we did Superpod.
Okay, right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, let's rip the Band-Aid off. I know a lot of people want to talk about this.
It still hurts. It's still so painful.
Okay, so I'll give my recollections, and then you feel free to chime in or whatever. But so we knew you guys were coming out. You know, Will, obviously with Token, his management, was able to kind of get us a venue very last minute, because we hadn't planned it. It was very, you know, fly by the seat of our pants kind of thing. And I don't think at that stage at Melbourne Comedy Festival there were many live podcasts, if any, maybe, you know, one or two.
I don't maybe Little Dum Dum Club, but but they were just like a tiny little thing. Yeah, we were definitely the first podcast that had a big audience.
Yeah. So I think we initially booked ourselves into a room of 50, and then that sold out. And
like in minutes.
Yeah. And we're like, okay. So we went to the biggest room that they could get us, was like 300 in the town hall. And it was kind of nerve-wracking for a few reasons. One, I'm not like a comedian, and so that was my first. I'd done a play, like a comedy play at Melbourne Comedy Festival years ago, but that was, you know, my concern is like, can I hang with 3 professional comedians on stage?
But you've done comedy before. Now we know that.
And then the other thing was, okay, is it going to work? Like we have done each other's podcasts, but, you know, is this a bad idea? Are people going to want to come to a comedy show to see? And
then what's it going to be like when we're on stage and they're all there? We had done a couple of live shows in LA, and it went good, but we still didn't know what this was going to be. Yeah. And then when the tickets started selling, it was like, well, this is crazy. Yeah. They sold fast. Really fast.
And it was also, I think we got 2 days out and we realized we didn't have anything. And so that's when
that's right.
I said to Will, look, I've got this idea. What do you reckon? I said, I've got my first stand-up routine I did. For people who don't know, and I doubt that anyone who's watching this doesn't know this, but I briefly dabbled in stand-up comedy. I think I did 4 stand-up gigs.
Four of the greatest gigs of all time.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you were a guy, I would say you're a natural, and you just understood comedy like no other.
So I had my entire routine. Would you say it like it was written down, but it was it wasn't like notes that I would ad lib off. I had written every pause and comma and full stop in this routine. So Will immediately was like, "Yes, that is like red meat to a cage of tigers. Definitely bring that out." So we hit the stage. The show, you guys come out. Show's going really well. We bring out the stand-up routine. Everyone relax, makes its debut. Crowd goes fucking bananas. Yeah. Everything about this show is on fire. Like, it felt like we could have all dropped our pants and like taken a giant shit, and the audience would have given us like a 10-minute standing ovation. Just one of those.
It was literally one of the best shows I've ever had in my life, if not the best show. Like, it was just like, this is one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. Like,
I know.
We walked off stage and we were like, that was amazing. Like, I don't know what just happened. Like, it was literally like, this is the fucking pinnacle. Like, it cannot get better.
I mean, can you imagine me too? Like, a guy who's only ever done sort of like low-level theater or a couple of like dinky open mic stand-up gigs. So I've gone from no experience to this is my first, it's like I stepped onto court with the Chicago Bulls of nowhere, and I'm scoring 3-pointers, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, literally no one could do wrong. Like, anything we said, it was just all golden. It was the best.
And so we exit the stage, we're all hugging and high-fiving, and that was great. And I think Gemma and Amy came to meet us, and Greg was there as well. And we all went for dinner or something after the show. And that's when Will's manager came to find us.
Yeah, and where was I? I think I'd gone to watch. I was at a gig. Okay, I was at a gig,
yeah. Yeah. And so now I can't remember if this was the night after or the same night, but it doesn't really matter. The point was, it was me, Greg, and Will together, and Dave somewhere else. And then the manager comes and tells Will, and I see like him just go pale. And then he has to sort of like tell us. And the whole dinner, I remember, like with our partners and Greg and everything, was just like, more food, more wine, everything. Nothing could be better. And we're retelling the story and the best bit. And when you said that, and then that bounced, oh my God, like everything was just like, if it was a movie, you would say they're laying it on a bit thick. I know, like they're playing with a puppy. The puppy's gorgeous. This puppy's about to get John Wick.
Someone sends over a bottle of wine.
Yeah. So Will's manager comes over, Will tells Greg and I, and we're like, fuck, devastated. And I seem to recall, my memory of it is we got to this next step very quickly, which is like, what are we going to do? And okay, well, maybe we should just call an emergency pod to talk about it. And then I can't remember whose idea it was, but someone said, let's not tell Dave until we get him in front of a microphone. So we go to Will's room, me, Greg, and Will, and we start the show, and it's all just our thoughts of it. And like, Greg's quite nervous because he's wanting to get you there, and it's urgent to get you there, but he doesn't want to give the game away. Yeah. I wish I'd been filming it, because he was like, just how to kind of text you and get it all right, and then you come in, so you can pick up the story from there. So you come into the room.
Oh my God, I walk in and you guys are acting relatively normal. Like, you guys were hiding it pretty well. Like, no one was. And then I sat down and we start recording, and then you guys hit me with it.
And it was a perfect response. Like, you went silent, and I think when I listened back to it, it was about 30 seconds of silence.
I just didn't.
Calm, measured.
Like, I just didn't know. I didn't know. Like, it was just because going from that, like, that high of just being like, this was the greatest thing ever, and then just being hit with that, and I was just like, it's like my mind went blank. I was just like, no.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it at first, right? I was like, no.
You didn't. Yeah, you quickly went from how to those motherfuckers. Like, but it was with a kind of resigned. It was a resigned kind of anger, like you had expected. Because I can't remember, something else about the festival had been annoying you up to that point. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And I
Well,
think you had lost faith in something, and so this was
well,
not a.
I was doing a one man show, and uh, Carl Chandler was helping me out with the room, and then the place that he had found, there were like 4 comedians doing shows. The owners were like, yeah, we're not going to do it. We're just going to shut down the club. So I went from having a space to not having a space, and then the festival came in because Will was the producer, and then the festival came in and kind of and gave me a room and kind of saved my ass. But it was all very, I don't know. It was just fucked. Like
You weren't feeling the love.
I was not feeling the love. No.
Yeah, and so you feel unloved, and then you find out that they've killed your baby. Well, they didn't kill your baby. They left it in the car on a 40-degree day with the windows wound up. 40 degrees Celsius, David, Fahrenheit, just so you know.
What did they do? They pulled out the card.
We will never get to the bottom of this. This is this is like the Dillinger, what's his name?
So, John Dillinger?
John Dillinger, yeah. It's a mystery. It will
So
never go solved.
Now that we've done podcasts and a lot of live podcasts, I would say the person just didn't hit record.
I agree. Because how often have you had a corrupted memory card that you've like pulled it out and it doesn't work?
I mean, that's happened to me like once, maybe.
Because I remember asking if we could get the cards because I thought maybe I could, and they didn't.
They wouldn't. Yeah, so that means they didn't record it. Like, of course, they would try to give it to us to see if we can find it, get an expert in there. But the fact that they never did, they never recorded. The guy just never hit record. That's all. That's all.
Which is probably like, I mean, I don't know. Is that standard in a comedy show? You wouldn't record in a comedy show necessarily.
No, and that's right. And considering we were one of the first podcasts ever, they just didn't know, and they brought in a sound guy, and no one told them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what happened. The whole thing felt very, very dodgy. I just felt like there would be more of a clearer explanation. If it had been a corrupt memory card, then why not give it to us? I mean, because I think it was our memory card, right?
Yeah, I believe it was. I believe it was.
So not only did we not have a show, they kept our memory card. I don't remember anyone getting it back. You know what? Look, I don't know if anyone who works at the comedy festival or was maybe, working the town hall that night, if you were completely anonymous, if you have inside, well, maybe we should offer a reward. We'll offer a reward for any information leading to an explanation for what happened.
Here's what we offer: front row seats to Will's first performance when he comes back.
Was that like the time when you came to Australia and you offered Will and I up as a prize as one of your? Do you remember that? You were doing stand-up in Australia, and one of your prizes was come to an AFL game with me, Charlie.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And that happened.
Yeah, I did because we felt bad for you. It was like. Could have cleared it with us first.
Yeah, but you guys are going to a game anyway.
Yeah, I think that was back when I was working for a network, so I was able to score some really good.
Oh, that's right. They were great tickets.
Yeah,
that was I say I know how to work the system.
Yeah, no, those are the good old days when I had a job and access to the best. Although there is no AFL to speak of at the moment, they've scheduled it's coming back. June 10th or whatever.
They're training, right? They're training.
They're training, yeah. And they're going to go into hubs, and I mean, I think it is a testament to the fact of how much people hate their families. Their clubs are going to this great expense just to give us something to fucking look at, to distract us. It's weird. I mean, I know you're a big sports fan, but Will and I were saying, with the Two Guys, One Cup, that it's actually been a bit of a relief to we're still doing it, but just irregularly. But it's been weird to be in winter, which is traditionally, football's my main game. To be in winter and not have that thing to kind of talk about with my friends.
Yeah, totally.
I realize a lot of my male friendships are based around sport. I seriously haven't spoken to a lot of my mates for 2 months because it's like, what the fuck? I don't want to find out about your feelings and shit and the hard time you're going through.
Yeah, it's definitely weird, and it's just created this big space. And that was one thing I didn't like. I was like, okay, we're going into lockdown, and I'll sit around and I'll watch sports, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, there's no sports.
Oh
I was just
God.
totally shocked. It took me like a week to get into a lifestyle where there's no sports. Like it was just kind of
Are you
rattled my
are
brain.
you finding it good or bad though? I've actually enjoyed having weekends to think about other stuff and do other things. I've been
Yeah.
much more productive in
Oh
the
yeah.
time that I haven't had to watch sport. And the idea of because they did play one game before they cancelled the season. They did one crowd-free game. It was weird. It's not the same thing. The crowd is an enormous part of why you watch sport. You know, it's the emotional charge. I
Yeah.
think otherwise you're watching a training drill.
Well, yeah, they're Germany, their soccer league, the Bundesliga is back, and they did their first games last weekend, and it was no crowd, and it was like a training.
Right.
It's what you felt like you were watching, but it's still fun to watch. I mean, you're watching the guys who are best at what they do, but it's not the same thing at all. And then
Yeah.
so you guys, the AFL, they're going to be secluded. Like they're not going to see their families. They're not going to
Yeah.
because in baseball they're talking about doing it in baseball with no crowds, but their plan is because in baseball you go out on the road for 2 weeks and then you come back for like 2 weeks and play at
Right.
home. So when they're on the road, they're isolated in a hotel and they can't gather and all that stuff. But then when they come back home, they're all going to live with their families. And I was like, that's not going to
Doesn't
work.
make any sense.
That's a terrible
Nah.
idea. Plus, baseball players are like half of them are like Republicans, so there's gonna be a bunch of guys who are like, I'm not wearing a fucking mask.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it just seems
Yeah,
bad.
I think there'll be issues with, I mean, especially, with football where it's young guys. Like you get a group of young guys together and they can't hang out, they can't play golf, they can't go to the pub, they can't hang out with their family, whatever. They're gonna go fucking crazy and they're gonna fuck shit
Yeah,
up. Like it's just
they are gonna fuck shit
young
up.
testosterone-filled guys. Like if they don't have something to do after the game, if it's just training and sport. I mean, fucking poor them. They're on big money and this is what they're paid to do.
I
But
know.
I just think from a
Well, there were guys in the Premier League, and the Premier League's not playing, but they kept catching players having sex parties. So they'd like fly to France with a couple of buddies and fuck sex workers in a hotel, and then whatever. Somehow the press would find out about it, and
well,
it's
they
like,
should just make
yeah, but
that
they're
part of the game, right? They should be like extra time. It's
yeah, that's
like how
happening.
many sex workers can you have sex with?
That's right. You have that off to the side. If they're not playing, they're just over there fucking, and then everyone else is playing.
So Dave, we have some questions. A few people have asked, they want to know, they want to get the lowdown on LA Podfest. So maybe give us like an all-encompassing answer, the start, the middle, and the end of LA Podfest.
LA Podfest is originally my idea, and then I brought it to Graham and Chris, and we just were like, oh, this is something because people were like Superpod and stuff. People were like into live podcasts, so we started it together and did a GoFundMe and or whatever Kickstarter, and then it just took off immediately. People really liked it. Um, the biggest problem was is some of us wanted to save money from the podcast festival of the year and roll it over, and other people didn't. So it ended up we weren't keeping any money in the bank.
Yeah.
And then we got hit by one bad year. I don't remember what happened, but a lot of shit went wrong, and then we just had nothing in reserve. We're like, boop.
And how hard was it, or was it hard to line up talent? Like I know there's obviously would have been a lot of, low-level podcasters, but you had Mark Maron one year. You had some pretty big
Uh-huh.
podcasts come and do the festival, right?
It was actually pretty easy because there was really nothing like it at the time. I don't think anyone else was doing a festival, so
No.
everyone just kind of jumped at it and was like, yeah, I mean, you guys were flying in from Australia. Like people just
Yeah.
wanted to do it because it was also really fun. Like you got to see their
Yeah.
podcast and
Well,
yeah,
I,
so it wasn't that hard.
I think the year it started, that was when I was on my hiatus,
Oh, that's
my
right.
network enforced hiatus.
Yeah.
Um, but then Will had had such a great experience at first. He did a Fofop with you and a
Yeah.
bunch of comics. And so he said to me the next year, oh, you should come out. And I was like, oh, it's going to be really hard, man, with my home and away schedule because, we shoot Monday to Friday. And he's gone, yeah, we'll just fly out when you finish work on Friday and then
Oh
as soon
yeah.
as you walk off stage, you fly back and you'll arrive back in Sydney like Monday morning. If you can get a late start to Monday, that's all you need to do. So I did. And I remember that's exactly how it went down. Flew out on a Friday, so you landed the same day in LA. So I had like 24 hours in LA before the show, did the show, got off stage, got straight into an Uber and went to the airport and flew back and then was on set the next day.
Yeah.
It was awesome, but it was so great and it was so worth it. And I remember the following year, I said to my agent, we need to carve out, give me, a week off at
Yeah.
that time of the year so I can do it properly next time.
Yeah. And then that's what I did when I did your guys' anniversary show in Australia.
Our anniversary show, which one was that?
Do you remember when I flew to Australia just to do the
Oh,
podcast?
yes. Yeah. That's right. And we had to keep you under wraps
Yeah.
because we told people there's a special guest.
Yeah.
That was a good live show. That was one of our better ones. I tried to follow it up the following year, where I don't know if you saw this, but it was the 5-year anniversary of the the death of Superpod, and so I was in LA and I was coming back and I was so kind of like trying to think up, I like to bring something to live shows and I had nothing. And then I was like, oh, well, it's the 5-year anniversary of the death of Superpod. And so I thought I'd do this whole bit about I'd have these broken memory cards that Will and I
Oh
would be
my
wearing, like, little amnesty badges. And I would hide like 5 in the audience, put them in envelopes. And so I was in LA, like I went to, what's the store where you buy all the like stationery and stuff? Not like CVS, whatever. Staples?
Yeah, Staples.
Yeah.
That's one. Yeah.
So I'd bought all these memory cards and a friend of mine is a prop designer and I explained to her, I said, I want these like commemorative badges of like broken memory cards. Like having, so she sent me the instructions. So I'm doing like arts and crafts in my apartment in LA and then on the plane. I'm like getting super glue stuck to my fingers, not fucking working, and then getting to Australia and having to go to another stationery place and buy more. Like spend about $200 on. Like, I saw Will the morning of our show. I was out on the streets. It was like 9 a.m. and Will was out for a morning walk, doing exercise. And he's like, "What are you doing?" Because I'm coming back from office works with like these bags of glue and memory cards. I'm like, "I can't tell you. It's a surprise for the show." That day, Will comes down with a flu. So I turn up backstage. I'm ready to go. And it's, just doing the final touches on these fucking badges and I've hid them around the theater. And, I put one up, but Will is pale and just looks like he's going to die. And we get on stage. And so we don't hit the ground running. Like, and Will's, God bless him, is trying his best, but he's so ill. Like every time I look over him, his position's like this. He's just he's just like just trying so hard not to vomit. And we do this whole memory card thing and I get John Deeks to read out this like soliloquy about and then I'm looking at the audience and I'm like, Superpod, right? You remember? You guys get to like 700 people in the audience. Superpod. The guys from Walking the Room came out. We did this whole thing, and the memory cards broke. But I don't think it was the memory. Anyway, it's fine. Look at your seats. 5 of you are going to have a memory card badge.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but those LA Podfest shows were great, and that's when I met Gareth for the first time. So when did you start doing the dollop? That would have been around 2015, 2016?
Yeah, I think it was 2015. Yeah, Greg was going on tour to Australia. And I was like, well, I want to keep doing Walking the Room. And then I had Gareth on, and people were responded so, they were so excited about it. Gareth, and Greg got upset. It's like,
oh, that's right.
He was like, fuck, because all these people were tweeting about how great Gareth was. And he was like, what the fuck? It's my podcast. And I was like, yeah.
That's so funny. I mean, I do get a lot of people tweeting at me that they prefer guest Charlie number 1 to the actual Charlie. So
yeah, that's really nice.
I can understand where Greg's coming from in a way. But so you do Walking the Room, and then, and this is no disrespect to Walking the Room and the legacy of Walking the Room, but you do the dollop and that hits, like it really, really hits.
Yeah.
So take me through that. Was that just, did you feel like because the dollop is more of a gimmick. It's not just two guys talking, you're doing all the research and stuff. Was that like a concerted sort of thing of like, the next thing I do, I want it to have a bit more of a structure?
Yeah. Oh, I definitely didn't want to talk about myself anymore and just tell stories about my life. I was like, I'm fucking done minding my own life. And I
Dave,
always,
Dave,
yeah, yeah.
we were all done. We were all done. I mean,
I
look,
got
I
a lot of
get
notes.
it.
Yeah, so I was originally just doing it as like a way, because this is when I was starting uh, gearing up to do the one man show. So it was like, I'll just go do a half-hour podcast where I just kind of ramble and talk about a subject and see if I can get material out of it. So I was doing that, and then I did like four, and I was like, ugh, I don't like it that much. So, and
Right.
then that thing happened walking in the room, and I was like, well, why don't I just try this with Gareth? And originally the idea was I was going to do it a different comedian every week, and then Gareth was so good, it was like, well, that's the show. And then
Yeah.
and then it just took off. Like I didn't expect it to be. I was
And how
talking to Karen.
did you and Gareth just meet doing gigs and stuff? Like,
We
how did you guys partner up?
we met on podcasts. So
Ah,
he was on a podcast called The Naughty Show, which was not great. But I knew the producer, and she would have me on, and then I would spend a lot of time making fun of the stuff that was happening on the show. Like it was almost like a Howard Stern type thing, where there'd be a
yeah,
stripper or whatever,
cool.
and I'd just be making fun of what was happening, and then Gareth and I would joke around, and then I was on another podcast, and we were doing the same thing, and I was like, this guy's really fucking funny. I want to have him on something. So I
Yeah.
just met him on podcasts.
I mean, the thing that struck me about Gareth was that when we did that, because that was the first time I met him, was LA Podfest. We did that live show, and it's like, holy shit, you can handball this guy anything,
Yeah.
and he runs with it and makes it like 10 times funnier, or he takes it into like his improv skills are out of this fucking world, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. He's amazing. Like, and I've had people come on, and I'm like, hey, it's hard to keep up. Don't be intimidated. And there's been a couple people who've just been like shut down and been like, what's happening? Like, I
Well,
can't do that.
there is an element too of just like not wanting, Will and I talk about this a lot. Like, sometimes you'll be asked to go on a podcast that you really love, and you're a fan of, and it's like part of me is like, don't fuck this up.
Yeah.
I hate it when I listen to this show and there's some fucking third wheel and they're, trying to get his lines in. So shut the fuck up.
I know, totally. Yeah. 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 You don't want to be the guy that everyone hates.
Yeah. So when did the dollop really how long did it take for it to gain traction to become what it is?
Yeah, I was about a year into it. I was like, oh, this is actually a thing. Like this is actually becoming a legitimate sort of thing.
And
So
so
it was about it.
what's the workload like? Do you do all the research or do you pay people to do research for you? Like,
Yeah, I've starting about a year ago or maybe a little more. I think I started paying people to do research, and then they give me like a outline, and then I rewrite it usually. But it's very helpful to have people do the research.
oh, I could imagine. So how much time would you say is spent on your rewrite?
It's about 6 hours.
Right. Okay. And
Yeah.
so they're just giving you the facts. Are you restructuring it in a way to make it more of a story? Because I
Yeah.
notice in the way you tell it, like that, you will put out, little bits of bait and then boom, and so is
Yeah,
that what
yeah.
you're doing in the rewrite?
Yeah, I always go through it, and I like it always linear, is because a lot of the times I get it's jumping around time wise. I like to have a linear timeline, and then yeah, I try to make, if I find something and it's just kind of teased in the research, then I can do more research and be like, oh my God, there's something really good here. But
And do you
yeah,
get, I imagine there must be like some hardcore history nerds. Like, do people get in contact with you and either like give you supplementary information or do they actually you and say, well, actually, that person that you painted as this was much more like this. Does that happen much?
I get that sometimes. Like we just did this one on Venezuela. I'm getting a lot of people like, that's not what Maduro, it's that.
No,
You're like,
yeah.
okay.
Good to see you staying away from the hot button issues.
But I definitely I get a lot of people, interestingly, who are like I'm a history teacher or history professor,
Yeah, right.
and you're right, and like like a validation that I did a decent job, I've only gotten a few like "you're wrong, this is bullshit." No, I don't get that many of those. I did at first, but I don't anymore.
I remember seeing something on Twitter when you did it was a two-parter, the Trump episode, right?
Yeah,
And you put it up, and I saw there's a bunch of, I don't know if they were necessarily like MAGA, but they were just people who feel like everything that needs to be said about Trump has been said. You know, it's kind of hackneyed material for a comedian to go after Trump, like blah, blah, blah. That was the kind of thrust. And I remember the way you responded was like, well, no, listen to it because
yeah,
this is not, he wears fake tan and,
right.
there is a history of this family that is really seedy. Like, it's organized crime, links, all this kind of stuff. Like his father was into eugenics, all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. And I thought it was really interesting because you took someone, because even I am like you go on Twitter and it's like someone's raging about Trump. And you're like, really?
yeah,
Like, I mean, it's almost 4 years. Like, you know what he is. Like,
yeah,
Trump said something outrageous. Who would have fucking thought?
yeah,
But,
right.
but I thought the way you guys approached it was really smart and interesting because it's like, well, rather than looking at, the sum total, what are the elements that led to him being who he is? And the implication I got, maybe I'm wrong, is that there is a class of people like this in America. This is not uncommon. There are a
Yeah,
group of people who, after the Industrial Revolution, profited hugely, and they have managed to hang on to that wealth and that power for 3 generations now. And it's not this case of Republican versus Democrat or whatever. It's a class war. There
yeah.
are the super wealthy, and then is that a fair reading?
Yeah, there's the super. Yeah, that's exactly right. They're not like Trump's a good example of someone who didn't achieve anything. His father made the empire, and then he just stumbled through it, and now his sons are going to stumble through it. But they're idiots. They're not people who achieved anything. They were just born into it, and then they get to keep playing the game. And that's what America is now. It's just all these people who are the children of people who succeeded, and now they're just kind of like, yeah, I guess I'll be a congressman, or
But that's
and
and that's both sides of the political aisle, right? Like
yeah,
there are
yeah,
dynasties in American politics.
oh, totally. There's so many. I mean, Pelosi's from a dynasty. They're all from dynasties. It's just they're born into it.
Yeah. Now I don't think we've got much time. We've only got 4 minutes because they kick you off after an hour. So last thing I wanted to ask you was I saw you've been tweeting about Ireland and you had plans to move to Ireland.
Oh,
Where are you at with that?
we can't go. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to. This is the problem. I'm in America, and other countries are just not going to let us go to their countries. So as
Yeah.
of right now, you can't go from Ireland from America to Ireland. So
And what's like? Do you have any ancestral? Like, could you get a visa, or what would do you
I
have a passport
don't.
or
We
no?
would just have to. We would just have to start from scratch. But it's
Right.
fairly compared to other countries, it's fairly easy to emigrate to Ireland.
Yeah. But did you
Um,
have did you have ancestors from Ireland? No?
Anthony was the first name. It was changed
Okay.
when they got to Ellis Island.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, it's O'Neill. That's
Okay.
the yeah.
Yeah. What part of Ireland were you looking to move to?
Just north of Dublin. That's where we're looking.
Yeah. Belfast is quite peaceful, from what I hear.
Yeah, it's a nice place.
I went to Ireland for the first time 2 years ago for my 40th. My friends all chipped in and bought me a return ticket to Ireland so I could visit
Nice.
because my mother is Eileen McSweeney. Can't get much more Irish than that. And so I
Yeah,
did a whole trip back to the town where the original Sweeneys were from. They left half of them went to America and half of them went to Australia back in like the 1850s. And I went to this town, which is literally a one-horse town, and walked around and thought I'll go into the pub and have a Guinness. That's what my great grandfather would have
yeah.
done. And while I was there, I started chatting to the barman, and he said, "So what's your heritage?" I said, "Sweeney." And he's like, "Oh, there's a Nellie Sweeney who lives across the road." So we walk across the road, we meet this old lady. Long story short, it's my mother's second cousin.
That's insane. That's
Yeah. She
insane.
brings out these like boxes filled with like documents, passports and stuff because she's been keeping the family history. And so we find my family there all the way down to me. It was insane.
Wow.
But It's amazing. I loved Ireland. I think it's,
Yeah, I love it.
I'm desperate to go back, but like you, I think international travel will be restricted
It's
for a
not.
while.
Yeah, it's not going. It's not
All right,
happening.
there's 30 seconds left, Dave. What would you like to say? Is there anything? How would you like to conclude this session?
Just.
Maybe in the tradition of Superpod, I could just delete this immediately, so there's no record of it. It's been really great. Okay, 10 seconds left. Dave, thank you so much. Let's do this again. I hope you're well. Stay safe,
Thank you.
and maybe see you in the Emerald Isle sooner rather than
Maybe
later.
or